The poets say that this world is not made of atoms, it's made of stories. Stories are the thing that keeps the world alive. They say that the world, the world that nowadays people worry that it might come to an end. But the ancient people said the world could only end if all the stories came to an end at the same time. So even by living out the story of one's life, a person is secretly contributing to the ongoing creation of the world. And you could say there's two stories, always ongoing. One, the big myths, the myths that make civilization, the myths that explain how power works and how the world works. And then the little myths, the inner myths, the story of each individual's life. And they say that both of those, the big myths and the individual story, are necessary to this world. And this two is secretly connected, so that inside a person really is a mythic way of being that is trying to move from them out into the world. It's an interesting idea. The modern world, people think that most things happen by accident. But in the mythological view of things, each person is actually a story embedded in a soul around which a body grows. And that a person's life is really the living out of the seeds of the story that brought them to the world, so that we are really carried by a story. And if a person can get close to the story that's seated in their soul, it's at those times that the world begins to make sense. Even a world as confusing as the modern world can make some sense when a person is near their story, or when a person sees the world through some of the myths. For instance, through the wonder of modern technology, you have people going from oblivion to being world famous in moments. Someone can be caught because they have a talent, because they make a mistake, and suddenly their image is all over the world, and they suddenly become known by many, many people. But often the people that get exposed in that way become overexposed. The lights are too bright, or maybe they rise too fast, and then they find themselves caught. For instance, in the old story of Icarus, the myth of Icarus, who flew too close to the sun, and the wings that he was using to fly with were only attached to his body with wax. And so when he got too close to the sun, the heat and hot source of creation, the wax holding the wings to his body melted, and Icarus fell down hard and fell down fast. And if you watch the world now, you'll see those who rise to the top often fall hard and often fall fast, because the old myths are still at play in the world. The things that happen in the world are old things happening again. As they used to say, there's nothing new under the sun, especially if you're caught in the story of Icarus and you're in the rise and fall of things. And inside any person's life, there's rising and falling. That's why when we see it happen to someone else, we know that story and we're also intrigued with it. That's how myth works. And so a person is really a myth trying to gather itself and walk through the world. And there's another old idea that says that people relate through stories. As a matter of fact, relationship means, from the Latin relatare, to bring your story back to the same person over and over again. And a relationship is also an exchange of stories and an exchange of the essential elements living inside the story, living inside the soul of each person. And the news is nothing but the new version of the old story. And the more a person gets a sense of myth, mythos, and mythology, the more they begin to see how it's the old stories being played out again and again. And that kind of awareness allows a person to begin to understand the meaning of their own life. And in the modern world, which has so much change bordering on chaos, where you can no longer count on anything that you see in the world very much, especially not on institutions that are collapsing and becoming hollowed out and becoming ineffective. Sometimes in a world like that, where uncertainty is the ruling principle, The only place that a person can find some sense of stability and some orientation to meaning is by finding the story they're already living and learning the elements of the story that brought them to life. Sometimes in a world like this, that is changing so rapidly, the only security is in finding the elements of one's own story and therefore understanding the world through the story that brought each one of us here. That's the way the people used to talk when people talked about story, before people thought that the facts could tell the story. Because from the old point of view, no aggregation or bringing together of facts are ever enough to tell the whole story. The facts simply can't tell the whole story. Only a lived life can tell the whole story. And they used to say that you never know who a person really is until their last breath has gone out and their story has reached a conclusion, because people have secrets in them, have powers that they haven't used yet, and only at the end can you see revealed the story that they lived. At least that's what they say in the world of mythology and in the world of story, when they're talking about how this world is not made of atoms, but it's made of stories.